I want to welcome you to the South Central Texas Glass Recycling Workshop. I'm very, very excited today to host this great group of presenters from all across America, not just in Texas. So it's a great thing to hear about all these cool programs that are working to help glass recycling. This is a great workshop in coordination with the Alamo Area Council of Governments, STAR, and the Glass Recycling Coalition. Perfect. Just a quick little run of the webinar logistics. So you are muted as an attendee. You can check your dashboard there. And if you want to, or actually we do encourage, please to use the question and answer box if you have any questions along any of the presentations. We are going to take questions throughout each presentation, but at the end of the block of the presentations, that's when we'll go ahead and review those and answer them as seen fit. Please do not have your questions be entered into the chat feature. A recording of this webinar will be available on glassrecycles.org as well as on the STAR website. And now we are going to kick off the fun part about these meetings. And if you've been to any of our workshops or an RRS workshop or any other one that has used this feature, it's a poll everywhere and it's a super cool feature. So we need to have you grab your phone, or you can open a browser on your on your computer. And how this works is you need to compose a new text message. So you start a brand new text message, and instead of entering a name, so don't enter Bob or Jim or anybody, you enter the number 37607 as the recipient. And then in your message body, you need to type recycle 123. So everyone just do that real quick, and that should get you into this live poll. And then we're going to go to a question, and we'll see how this all works. All right, so again, if you're on the website there, it's pollev.com/recycle123. And go ahead and based on this question here, yes, what part of the value chain do you represent? Are you from a MRF? Are you from the glass industry recycling program? Oops, looks like we jumped ahead. Maybe we're on a different question. So hold on one second. There we go. So, okay, MRF, glass industry recycling program at the state or local level, or other recycling. And we'll give you guys about 30 to 45 seconds to get those answers in. All right. Looks like a large percentage of our attendees are from recycling programs, which is great. It's a good thing to see that, because this is really focused on you as an attendee of we need to help the recycling programs out there, but also good representation from MRF, glass industry, and other recycling. All right, we've still got some answers coming in. That's good. Okay, and I think we're going to jump into another quick poll. So as the title goes there, if you could use, or if you could describe glass recycling in one word, what would it be? It's a general, broad word there for glass recycling. And emojis do work. It's a key aspect there. We learned that yesterday. Good. So challenging seems to be a one that is definitely a key aspect there in people's opinions. Essential, purple, love it. Needed, that's a good one. No brainer, it's obvious. Opportunity, doubtful. So there's some, you know, I think that's a challenging word in my opinion to hear that there's some doubt. So that's what we're here for. County, good. Contaminant, it's definitely viewed by some as a contaminant, but you know, with the technologies that we've seen in some of the MRF infrastructure, it's actually becoming not really good. All right, that was a good one. So I'm going to go into just a brief review of who we are. So I'm Jordan Fenzel. I'm the Executive Director of STAR, which is the State of Texas Alliance for Recycling. We're a 501c3. Been around for about 31 years in the state of Texas with a mission to advance recycling through partnerships, education, and advocacy for the benefit of Texas. We have about 34 different entities that help us advance our mission, and that ranges from processors to manufacturers, as well as local and other governments. And so we're busy doing council outreach as well as legislative measures. One of our recent successes was Senate Bill 649, and we are in the midst of a recycling market development plan headed by the state of Texas. So that's going to come out in 2021, and we're really excited about that. And I'm going to go ahead and pass on over to Christopher to talk about AACOG.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christopher Moken, and I'm the Solid Waste Management Coordinator here at AACOG, also known as the Alma Area Council of Governments. And AACOG is a quasi-state entity, and we help coordinate government activities with cities and counties across a 13-county region here in South Central Texas, with, of course, Bexar County being sort of our central hub. And our ultimate mission and function is to help provide the residents of this region with the best government services we possibly can. Next slide, please. We primarily get most of our funding through state and federal grants, but we do also rely on some membership dues and some revenue generating activities. Right now, we have a sizable staff of about 300 full-time employees, and our budget actually used to be $52 million for this year, but it has increased significantly with a lot of the COVID relief packages that the federal government has been passing. A lot of that funding is going through the COGS right now and being distributed to local governments. Next slide, please. And this slide just gives you a general idea of some of the many activities that AACOG provides. We are a rather large and diverse entity. And of course, I mainly operate in the Resource Recovery Department, which is shown there in red. But basically, across most of our counties, a lot of your citizens or residents, or perhaps even you, have benefited for some of our services somewhere and perhaps didn't even know about it. We just have very large and wide services. And later on today, I'll talk a little bit of one of the reasons about why AACOG reached out to STAR and GRC to bring this webinar to all of our participants here in the region. And then if you'd like to reach out to me, you can feel free to contact me here, and be more than happy to speak with you and see what we can do to help you out.
Great, thanks, Christopher. And then again, for everyone, that we will be sending out a speaker's contact list at the end of this, so that if you do have questions that weren't answered during this, you'll be able to reach out on your own. Go ahead and pass it on over to Scott to talk about the Glass Recycling Coalition.
Thank you very much, Jordan, and welcome to everybody for joining us today on this important webinar. I'm Scott DeFife. I'm the president of the Glass Packaging Institute, but I also serve on the leadership committee of the National Glass Recycling Coalition, and also serve as the executive director of the Glass Recycling Foundation. And so I can speak a little bit about the entire glass manufacturing industry, but specifically here, the Glass Recycling Coalition is one of the sponsors of this webinar. And the Glass Recycling Coalition spans multiple industries, everyone who's interested in and works within the glass recycling or recycled glass, users of recycled glass industry. We have about 30 members. We have a website with multiple pieces of information, background, talking points, and all sorts of wonderful information for those that are supporting glass. We can move to the next slide. Here's some of our members. Our founding members and those across the top are glass manufacturing companies, brands that use glass, haulers, MRFs, processors. Those across the top are in the leadership committee of the GRC, Gallo, OI, Diageo, and Pratt. But you can see our membership here, and we would welcome many new members to the GRC. It is a network for many organizations. You can see urban mining, the fiberglass industry, other users of recycled cullet end markets are joining the GRC. We have, as I said on our website, one of the best tools that we get common interest in is our map of glass resources. Really the the glass infrastructure in the United States on our map, and we keep that updated. As you can see, drop-off locations, processor plants, fiberglass plants, and our tools on how communities can engage in glass recycling, along with some case studies and some other activity that would be beneficial to recycling and sustainability officials across the country. Next slide. Specifically in this arena, one of the newer initiatives that we have is our MRF glass recycling certification that we came up with last year. And in Texas, Balcones Resources was one of the first MRFs to achieve that certification last year, along with Sedona in Arizona. And we are now reviewing multiple other MRFs that would like to be a part of that program. This is a process that does not cost any money to be a part of, but with the submission of some material and practices and standards, a independent third-party group of experts will review that and then award certification or give a set of activities that need to be finished in order to accomplish certification. And then GRC would promote that MRF as being certified by the GRC. In addition, I mentioned the Glass Recycling Foundation. The GRF is a charitable 501c3 organization that has taken in a couple of foundation grants, and we use the GRF to leverage private sector and environmental NGO, other foundation interests and finances to help leverage local contributions or interests in what we call glass interventions in order to upgrade facilities or expand collection and recovery of glass across the country. Lastly, on behalf of GPI, I think it's always helpful to talk about markets. So just a quick, because we hear over and over again, there's no markets or things of that nature for glass. And we have a focus here on the South Central part of the United States. In Texas, there are at least 2 glass manufacturing plants and other glass manufacturing plants within reasonable distance in Louisiana and Oklahoma, in addition to fiberglass plants and processing facilities. I know we're talking about the Alamo area, the South Central. I am from Texas. I grew up in Houston, but went to school in Austin. So I'm familiar with the distances that the material needs to travel, and that's one of the issues that we need to tackle here today. But this gives you a visual representation of the glass infrastructure in the area. And that is it for my quick introduction. I'm gonna, I guess, pop it back to Jordan.
Right on. Yeah, thank you very much. And I think that's a key thing to talk about is just that factor, that the domestic infrastructure that we are talking about growing, and we have realized that logistics are a problem. So that's what we are addressing today is the successes that are outside of Texas, hoping to implement and mirror those here in Texas for the rural and outside communities of AACOG. Okay, so what we're going to do now is hop into the first real chunk of this discussion today. And what we want to know is the San Antonio area, what exists? So we're going to hear from 3 different entities about current situations, current conditions, and why we're all kind of gathered here today. So I'm going to just kick it over to Christopher, and he's going to talk about AACOG and their glass recycling experience as of today. Christopher.
Thank you very much, Jordan. As I mentioned earlier in my previous introduction, I was going to speak just a little bit about what we have seen across our region relating to glass and recycling in general, and why we reached out to GRC and STAR to host this webinar today. So since the beginning of this year, I've been getting a multitude of calls and emails from concerned citizens and our local governments expressing frustration with being able to maintain their recycling programs. And we are seeing 2 large trends across our region, and that is that glass is just being dropped from certain recycling programs, and then also we're seeing cities that are entirely cutting their recycling program. Just the other day, I got a call from a concerned citizen out in Gray Forest, which is a very small town outside of Helotes, and their city has ended their entire recycling program. So I get this kind of notifications almost on a weekly basis, and because of that, I know that we wanted to aggressively move forward with some sort of regional plan or at least some pilot projects on how we can start tackling some of these issues. And more specifically with glass, actually, as I know Jordan mentioned, today we're going to be taking a look at some of the existing markets, and we're going to be taking a look at some of the successful programs across the nation. And then we're going to, after this webinar, reach back out to everyone and start a more engaging conversation about what all of you like about what you heard today and how we as a region can either engage in some pilots or engage in some other processes that will allow us to more effectively recycle glass in our region. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Christopher. Appreciate it. And so we're going to go ahead and now hear from Bruce with, actually, sorry, Bill, my apologies, with waste management. So we're going to talk about the MRF technology and how that is working in the South Central Texas area. Oh, it is with Bruce. Bruce, you're muted. I apologize.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Sorry about that. That would make things a little bit easier. Yeah, I'm Bruce Magnuson with Waste Management. I've been operating MRF since San Antonio the last 17 years. So just talk a little bit about glass from the MRF perspective. So go to the next slide. So some glass facts. Glass makes up 4.5% of the overall waste stream and 13.1% of material recycled, according to the EPA. And glass plays an important role in achieving recycling goals in many communities. Glass makes up 18% of the average waste management MRF stream, so there's a lot of it. As materials become lighter, glass makes up a higher percentage of the MRF stream, so there's less newspaper, but glass kind of stayed constant, so there's just a higher percentage of it. Glass beneficiation. Glass flows from the MRFs to beneficiation plants for sorting, crushing, and cleaning before delivery to the bottle manufacturers or other end users such as fiberglass mills, etc. And the if I can pronounce this, the inelasticity of glass supply impacts market. The constant supply from curbside collection combined with uneven demand creates imbalanced markets across the U.S. So that can also be a challenge. Next slide, please. So there are multiple solutions that vary by region, even though there may technically be sufficient demand for acceptable process cullet by the glass bottle and fiberglass manufacturing industry. Supply and demand of specific colors do not always balance by geography, depends on what the end user is looking for. And municipal contracts are beginning to reflect the cost of recycling glass with low commodity pricing for all materials, which has been a big challenge the last few years. Each must stand on its own. The high cost of recycling glass has been elevated through these efforts. Waste Management likes glass in our programs as long as the processing fees accurately reflect our cost or price. You know, for me here in San Antonio, I've got to ship it pretty far away, and so it actually, you know, costs me more money to ship it than it does, you know, for any rebate I get. And so as the cost of recycling glass increases, communities are moving towards alternate collection methods for glass. And these decisions are made for the health of their overall recycling programs. I know some communities are doing glass drop-offs where you can drop it off by color, and that's been pretty effective when you can keep glass color separated. Next slide, please. So glass in or out is not the issue, rather the markets need to be available. The specifications need to be defined and the processing costs need to cover the cost of separation and getting the material to the end markets. Like I said, I ship our glass to Strategic Materials in Midlothian, that's 251 miles away, and I have to pay for the haul. And then new contracts and RFPs need to be evaluated multiple ways. Waste Management is willing to recycle nearly anything that has an available end market. Proposals will and may offer options for different materials to let municipalities and other customers choose what they want to be in their program, but will have cost options to ensure any method makes financial sense. So there's a cost to recycling glass that needs to be reflected in any recycling program. Like I said, currently the closest outlet for our glass is Strategic Material Plant in Midlothian, Texas. If you're not sure where Midlothian is, it's pretty much due west of Waxahachie and south of Dallas. The glass is shipped in gravel trailers. We put it between 25 and 26 tons at a time. And then that glass is used to make fiberglass, fill for bricks, landfill cover, etc. So There are end markets for it, but unfortunately, because I have to ship them almost halfway across Texas to get to that, to the closest place that'll take it. Next. So this just kind of talks about the glass process a little bit, you know, consumer glass, single stream, and then the container stream, and then in different communities, the glass can, the amount of glass can differ. I can't tell you that in the city of Austin, the amount of glass is phenomenally heavy. There's a lot of beer and wine drinkers there, not as much glass in San Antonio, but there's still a lot. Next slide, please. And then, so we kind of, when it goes into our system, we have a glass breaker and a fine screen that pulls out all the glass, or most of the glass, over 90% of it. Then it goes through a glass cleanup system where we have, there's a vibrating screens to separate the glass, and then we have a vacuum system to suck up little shreddy pieces of paper and things like that. And then at the end, it just gets dumped out into a big pile outside, but in its own bunker, where it sits there until we load it up in the gravel trucks. And then for the end markets, 50 to 70% is usable glass. And then there's fines glass, which is smaller than what the the glass manufacturer wants, and the rest could be unusable things. Could be bottle caps, little shredded pieces of paper, things like that. So the usable glass, and that's a good picture right there. You can see there's lots of glass, but you can see that there's little shredded pieces of paper and bottle caps and things that the system just does not get out. So by weight, that the things they don't, that aren't glass, don't weigh that much, but they, by volume it kind of looks like a little bit more, but in that pile there, it's probably 55 plus % usable glass. Next slide. So the MRF economics, the increasing cost of handling, like I said, 80% of inbound recycles are glass and 60% of contaminants. So we got, a third of our material that's coming in has a net cost to get rid of, not revenue. So that does affect recycling programs, especially with very low commodity prices, that it does cost more to recycle. So that does put pressure on different municipalities and other groups that are, want to do single stream or glass recycling. And that's all I had. I don't know if there are any questions, or I'm not sure if we're doing questions right now or questions at the end.
Yeah, I think we're going to do questions at the end, and that's a perfect little reminder point for attendees. Please, if you have any questions, go ahead and enter them in the Q&A box there, and Scott's going to be monitoring that for us and feeding the questions to the speaker. So we encourage to please ask away. This is your time and the opportunity to be able to ask your questions that are relevant to this glass recycling. So I appreciate it, Bruce, and I apologize again about the name mix up there.
No problem.
That's good. And I do have some comments at the end of this about, just some questions and stuff about the MRF and all that, but cool stuff. We're going to go ahead and go right on over to Rachel with Keep Texas Beautiful, and she is the director of the Keep Texas Recycling Program. And go ahead and turn it over to Rachel.
Thanks, Jordan. I'm going to quickly give you some background information on the type of work I do with the communities throughout the state and how that gives me some insight into glass recycling, particularly in rural communities. I'll go through several scenarios and my hopes for next steps and how we might be able to start more discussions on how to increase glass recycling in Texas. Next slide. So KTR is actually a new program for Keep Texas Beautiful, but KTR as an entity and a rural recycling cooperative has been around for over 25 years. The core of what we do is help increase recycling access in rural and underserved communities. The majority of who we work with is involved with the KTR co-op, and that includes cities, counties, military bases, etc. However, we do provide technical assistance, consulting, and special projects with a variety of different organizations and communities. This year, we were a TCEQ Environmental Excellence Award winner, so we're super proud of that, mostly for the fact that it's bringing a new focus to rural communities and what's happening in rural Texas. Next slide. Every community we work with has a different set of issues and resources. However, a lot of what we do involves the actual implementation of a program. We decide what commodities to take. Typically, that's based on their distance to market, how to obtain funding to purchase equipment, things for a building, collection, and decide various logistical setups and staffing. While some of our programs have curbside recycling, primarily what we're working with are drop-off programs. We always determine what kind of volume they are going to need and make recommendations on where the material will go and what vendors to use and what we can't use. For the KTR communities, we truly act as the administrative side of their program. We're watching markets, looking at new commodities and technology, help with grant assistance, et cetera. We also handle their data collection and reporting. These folks need to keep track and report on their tonnage and where it goes to be recycled when they get grant funding from the Council of Governments or COGS. And we help them keep track of that information regardless of staff changes, information getting lost, etc. Next slide. So my first examples are unfortunately a little more on the dark side of glass recycling, and these are programs that actually failed. However, I think that is always something to be learned from things that don't work. Both of these programs are west of San Antonio and ultimately super far from an end market, which meant they did have to have their material go through a MRF first. Both of these communities own their own landfill, so the cost avoidance of recycling is what really drives them and why they opted to recycle glass in the first place. One location, ended up discontinuing their program because they really wanted to send full truckloads of material, and that never panned out. One of the issues that they were having going to the MRF was that they were getting charged $50 a ton plus shipping to send that material, and sometimes that can be really hard to justify. The second location has been recycling glass for over 25 years, but they recently stopped when they shut down the program for a couple months due to COVID-19. When they reopened, they decided to scale back and discontinue the glass, and unfortunately, this was definitely a decision based on the predicted shortfalls the city will inevitably see in their budget due to COVID-19. They did not want to sacrifice the whole recycling program, so they cut out something that was a loss. Coincidentally, maybe this was at the right time because I just got word that the charges for them to continue the glass before they even knew that this program had been canceled was going to go up to $150 a ton. That's super hard to justify in Texas when landfill fees are so low. Next slide. So these next examples are more about reuse of glass versus recycling. However, I do feel it's important to highlight this as it has been a great example of how to keep glass out of the landfill. The two locations I wanted to look at have a small scale glass pulverizer, and this has been a really successful way to accept glass and use it within the community. One of the locations is quite proud of the fact that several businesses have been able to utilize their pulverizer in a way that's helped save the business money on disposal costs. In rural communities, businesses often struggle. So if they have an outlet for their glass or other recyclables and are able to remove a dumpster or maybe not have pulls as often, it's a win-win for them. One community on the right where you can see those ACE buckets down there, they're actually selling their pulverized glass to the public. So they make a little bit on it, which I think is even better. And, given any future maintenance costs or things that might go along with that machine, that might be a really good thing for them as well. Next slide. So this next one is one of our county programs. They have a pulverizer on a much larger scale. While we love the little $30,000 machines that the previous locations have because it's something more affordable, a smaller footprint, and they're able to store them inside a lot. Those are all great things, but for a county type program, we needed something a little bit different. The volume at this location is so much more it's just different. So it really does make it an option to have a bigger machine. This particular pulverizer, you can kind of see it down at the bottom where that red arrow is. That's where you dump the glass and then ultimately where the material comes out. It was purchased when the COG grant funding was much higher than it is now. So the ability to purchase a big ticket item like this was available, but now these machines are starting to age out, and that's concerning, as grant funding might not cover a new one in most communities. I know of at least 3 that have 100,000 plus in population that no longer offer glass for that exact reason. Their pulverizer went down and they opted not to replace it. The machine in this picture is operational, but costs about $5,000 to $10,000 a year to maintain. And I think the bigger issue for them lately is that parts are getting harder to find, and techs to work on these machines are also harder to find. So that's definitely a downside, but the upside is this material has lots of homes in the community, as you can see listed. They're using it for road base all over the county, setting fence posts, and they even told me that they use it for filling critter hulls, such as armadillos, which I thought was a very unique answer and something I had never heard before. This location does about 20 tons a month, so this is a huge cost avoidance for the community to go to the landfill with this material. And overall, we consider it to work well. I do think it'll be wise to start a cost analysis if this machine goes down, because at this point we need to figure out what their other options are and what would they do next. Next slide. This example is about a university's glass recycling program out in West Texas. They are very passionate about this program, and they are super proactive about recycling almost every commodity despite their distance to market. Overall, glass recycling runs in the red on this particular program due to the shipping costs and supplies. As you can see, they put their glass in these super sacks, which they have to cover the cost on. However, the revenue they do generate once it gets to the end market and the landfill cost avoidance, which they do take into consideration, really helps cut the deficit, so it's a little bit easier to justify. The biggest issue I see is that the city where the university is located doesn't offer glass recycling. And so as a result, everyone brings their material to the university instead. It's like the cost to recycle glass has been passed on to the university without much education or transportation assistance. So that makes it hard. To make matters worse, when COVID hit, they shut down this program. Obviously, students were no longer on campus. And that meant, once again, there's no glass recycling in this city of 200,000 plus. To my knowledge, there isn't a glass recycling option within a 3-hour radius of this community, so we know it has an even bigger effect. Now we're hoping we can bridge the gap between the university and the city to ensure this option continues. We do feel like this is a good example of how they've been able to make glass recycling work, though, despite the fact that the end market is 5 hours away. Next slide. This next community's recycling program is now entirely a drop-off program after a few failed attempts at curbside. They've had great success with recycling glass. This program's been around for a long time, and most of the material is clean. I did include those bags in the shot, and I'm told they're fairly new because the staff does go through the bins a lot during the day to clean out contamination. Despite limited education, they're getting the right thing in the right bin. And the biggest asset this community has is it's willing to deliver the material, so they don't have to worry about transportation costs beyond their own, and they are close to an end market. We have several in this area that are doing something similar, and obviously we love this example and know how important it is to this community and the others to offer glass recycling to their residents. Next slide. So it doesn't matter how many presentations I give and how many times I tell folks it can be hard to recycle glass. I always get questions about it again at the end of the presentation on, now, why can't we recycle glass? The need and the want is there from every community I think I've ever talked to, but overcoming the logistical and especially the financial issues continues to hinder us expanding programs. We know if there was more public demand for material made from recycled glass, that would be a huge step in the right direction. We often ask that, you know, these different residents and programs that I speak to, they often ask, you know, if there was more manufacturers were using it in their feedstock, maybe that would help. I think the question I get most often after why can't we recycle glass is, why isn't my wine bottle made of recycled glass? And, you know, maybe it is or it isn't, but this is what the public wants to know. from the KTR perspective, our biggest hurdle is how do we overcome the fact that Texas is such a large state and not neglect people that are west of I-35. I saw most of Texas was gray, Scott, and I would love to figure out how we could change that. And last but not least, how do we pump more financial incentives for communities to recycle glass? The COG grants are fantastic in helping us get the equipment and the collection things that we might need, but we always need to look for more. And we do need the residents to understand that recycling is a service and that services cost money. We also need to find more creative ways to help keep the naysayers at bay and not give leadership a reason to overlook glass recycling in their community. Next slide. Here's my contact information. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have and work with anyone and everyone that needs help with their recycling program. Thank you.
Right on. Thank you, Rachel. The virtual round of applause for all of our presenters. I definitely appreciate Christopher and Bruce and Rachel presenting that awesome information. And so we will break now just for a couple questions. I do believe that we have some questions that rolled in. But as you know, I again encourage you to please use that Q&A box to generate some talking points. But just I want to recap some different things that I caught from this presentation. And you know, it seems like this over resonating message is that people want to recycle glass in Texas, which is a great thing. Hearing from Waste Management that we have a good supply of glass coming into the MRFs, which is a great thing as well. The biggest problem that I end up seeing, or at least hearing about, is transportation, right? So we have in markets, but given that this is the third largest, it's a giant state, but third populous state, second largest in the contiguous land, but it's hard to get the material from point A to point Z. And so I think that is something that is to be looked at. But you have this great example of what Rachel is talking about, where in the case that transportation may not be available, but you do have the desire to recycle it and you have grant funding, then you get the machines, right? The grinders, the pulverizers, and you start using them for local applications, very circular on that. We would really love to see the glass be used back in glass recycling. I know that Owens, Illinois has a commitment to start putting at least 40% recycled glass back into bottles by a certain time up in the near future. So manufacturers are getting involved, whether it be plastic, metal, or glass, in consuming their material that they do put out to the public. So that interest is coming, and I think that's going to really help. I'm going to go ahead and we'll go over to the Q&A. Do we have any?
Yep. Jordan, we had a couple questions that came in. One was to Waste Management about whether contamination has increased as more materials are deemed recyclable and added to the bin. There was also a question recently about end markets used as mineral replacement in transportation costs, or for Texas DOT. And then there's a new question that I think will be covered in maybe the next section of speakers about public-private partnerships.
Right. So I guess, Bruce, are you able to address the contamination increased as recycled materials are added?
That's an interesting question, and it just kind of varies by community. We've seen some communities, their stream has become dirtier and more contaminated, and some have really focused on and it's become cleaner. So it's hopeful that some areas have been able to get the material cleaner, so it can be done. But so I guess it's it's kind of uneven across the board. So I'd say overall it's probably a dirtier, but there is some hope out there.
And are you guys actively working with, so if there's a community or a source that's identified as a higher contamination than normal, or like you mentioned, some are cleaner, some are dirtier, do you guys have a direct outreach program that you're working with to try to address that contamination?
Yeah, we do. We have our often recycle right program, and then we also do audits on inbound materials so we can identify where the contamination is coming from and provide feedback as is appropriate.
Okay.
Bruce, there was one additional question about whether you're transporting by truck or rail.
Oh, it's by truck. Yeah, it's in gravel trucks. So it goes out over 25 tons at a time.
guess that's something to be considered too, is do we have the connectability from rail from the area up? I know there's a lot of good railway in Texas, but is there an actual line that people could take advantage of? I think that's something that would be the need to be explored. That is good. And I did have one more question for you real quick, Bruce. Is Waste Management looking at the GRC certification for the glass recycling at all for that San Antonio plant?
That is an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to check and get back with you on that.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't trying to put you on the spot. It just seems like they've seen really good success out of Balcones that we've talked with, and it seems like that, cleaning that stuff up would get just a better market for it condition-wise. So perfect. Let's go to, I think, Christopher, or we're going to go through a poll. We had some other questions, but let's, we had a question from, okay, so it looks like we're doing pretty good. You got the pulverized glass. So there was a question about pulverized glass. Is state approved for road bedding, or is it in the roads for use for private roads? That's a good question as well. And it does look like Christopher answered that. Perfect. We do have some other open questions. I guess we're going to go ahead and move into the next poll. And we do have some other questions though. So Scott, do you want to just break real quick out of the norm of things?
Sure.
Do we want to answer these other questions?
A couple of these questions are going to be covered in the next set of presentations.
Okay.
About public-private partnerships and things of that nature. There was one additional question for Waste Management about what happens to the packaging that can't be separated but is labeled recyclable. So again, this goes to a lot of consumer contamination questions and confusion about which materials are and are not recyclable in a specific community.
Right. Yeah. Okay, perfect. So I guess we'll just go ahead and move on to the poll, and we'll address the other questions. I believe, like we were saying, that in the next upcoming presentation, those questions will be addressed, and we can circle back if they are not addressed. So let's jump to the phones or your computer and head up to this next poll question. What do you think could have the greatest impact on glass recycling in South Central Texas? Is that processing infrastructure, MRF cleanup? And that is pointing to, like, could a MRF clean up the glass better through their processes before it heads out to market? Transportation solutions, increased rail, subsidies, anything along that line, increased end markets, and then residential education. I think we touch on all of those. If we've heard about some MRF issues, we've heard definitely about transportation. We do realize there are in markets, they're a little bit distant, but also we've heard about resident contamination and probably a need for education. Looks like the answer is coming in for increased end markets. And again, I'll echo that we are working on that right now as a subcontractor at the state level for a recycling market development plan that the state will be pushing out to policymakers by 2021. So that will have, this is not another study, this is an actual prescriptive milestone set plan to help and support and grow the Texas recycling industry, which does include glass. Cool. 56% with increased end markets, but transportation comes in at that second right there. So I think that's the two things that we're hearing consistently is how do we get the material to who needs it, but also how do you get the material just in general to who needs it. So I think that's good. And for resident education, MRF cleanup 12%. Cool. Good responses. We are now, I believe, going to go into our next section, which really involves solutions that exist. So we know that programs work in other places, and we did already hear that Rachel does have success here with some of her programs, but also some failures. We're going to hear from Helen, the city of Alexandria, Virginia, tongue pull, and talking about glass recovery at a regional approach. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Helen.
All right, thanks, Jordan. Good morning, everyone. My name is Helen Lee. I'm the Environmental Program Manager for the City of Alexandria's Resource Recovery Division. Thank you, everyone at RRS and STAR for arranging this call today. So to put our conversation today into context, here's a little overview of us. Next slide. We're a historic city located in Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. We have a population of 160,000. We're surrounded by some of the larger counties, as you'll see on the map there. And the star that I marked is our neighboring jurisdiction and partner, Fairfax County, where our glass aggregation site is, which we'll get more into today. Next. I guess our glass story usually starts around here with a picture of Murph glass. And I think Bruce also shared a picture similar to this, and it might be a very familiar picture for many on the call. And in our region, we do not have close access to a glass beneficiation plant that can economically clean single stream Murph glass to an end market. And glass does not look like glass, and our glass from the Murphs in the region have been going to landfills for daily cover or bedding and whatnot. Next. And so as part of our division strategic planning process, we had asked an online feedback form as part of our engagement, would residents be willing to bring glass to drop-off bins if it meant improving the recyclability of these materials? And roughly 60% of the respondents said yes. And next, so we started to look at what was possible. We heard from our neighboring jurisdiction, Fairfax County, that they had invested in an equipment, an Andela pulverizer, that crushes glass into aggregate materials. We saw the end product where glass was crushed into sand and gravel, or a number 8 stone alternative, materials that all public works departments, which many solid waste divisions are part of, require. Paving, road bedding, pipe bedding, backfill, stormwater filtration, glass mulch. I think Fairfax County was actually contacted by someone who was interested in making glass countertops. So there's a lot of uses here domestically and locally. And for us, next slide, is sandbags. In Alexandria, we frequently see flooding events, and the city buys sand to distribute sandbags to our residents in Old Town and businesses. And this helps us rely less on virgin quarry sand. We actually see a cost saving for buying this material. Next. And what's thrilling now, though, is since January 2020, Fairfax County, where we send our glass to be aggregated, have entered a partnership with Strategic Materials. And a percentage of the glass that is collected is being hauled to Wilson, North Carolina on a long haul trailer for glass-to-glass recycling, which we are so excited about. Next, so how do we go from Murph glass going into landfills to seeing a brand new glass-to-glass recycling program? And it all started at a meeting such as this one today, where the Northern Virginia recycling staff met on various waste issues. And we've been talking about glass for, a really long time, but we all started with the coordination of one thing, a color. And we coordinated on a color purple, and along with 3 other neighboring counties, Alexandria and the other county, started what was called the Purple Can Club. And in May of 2019, we added approximately 10 roll-offs to start with in the region. The bins have 6 10-inch circular openings, which is large enough to fit a pickle jar, but designed to prevent contamination. That's the success of this story, the restricted openings. Operationally, it's been very successful. It holds approximately 6 to 7 tons of glass, and the bins are accessible to both our residents and small businesses on a 24/7 basis. Next. So here's our yes or no instruction for glass. We ask our residents to empty and rinse. Labels are okay. All colors can be mixed, and metal caps and lids are okay because the crusher has a magnet that captures the metals. And you can also see some of the no's. We don't want plastic bags. We're very concerned about any fluorescents getting in there. So we're very clear about the messaging that, and of course the miscellaneous glass, including ceramics, porcelain, mirrors, windows, Pyrex. We get all kinds of questions about those other glass materials. And so this is strictly for bottles and jars. Excuse me. And to show off just how clean our glass bin is, if you see close enough, you'll see that even the salsa jars are rinsed out, and we rarely see contamination. Maybe we'll see a plastic bottle in there that a resident had maybe mistakenly put in the bin, but based on the feedback from Strategic, where these materials are going to, we have between 1% to 2% contamination in our loads. It's very, very clean, and it's been very consistent, which Bill can attest to that. So we intentionally placed these containers at our existing recycling drop-off centers. This was because we knew we had the built-in traffic. Some of these centers already have camera surveillance, and it provides a place to recycle cardboard and paper bags. We often see residents bringing their glass bottles in. One of these centers are also co-located with our permanent HHW center. The other is located with our free mulch pickup site. And we intentionally placed these containers, if you can go back, at these centers because we wanted to reduce that greenhouse gas impact of cars driving to these centers and helping residents run multiple errands at once, also exposing them of other services to our residents. And once we added these bins, residents just asked for more bins. And to increase that footprint, we actually sent out a letter to all of the grocery stores in the city asking if there was anyone interested in partnering with us and hosting a bin on their site. And Mom's Organic Market, which is a local grocery chain in the Mid-Atlantic, they signed up. And after an MOU was signed, the 5th container in Alexandria was placed. And as you see, the purple ribbon cutting picture with our city council. So in terms of education and outreach, next we sent mailers to our customers, obviously a lot of social media, town hall, training with our 311 staff, civic association meetings. We did outreach at our farmers market where we have our composting program, and we issued a joint release with our neighbors, resulting in pretty good media coverage. And one part of the education and outreach that was incredibly important for us was to ensure adequate accessibility of information of our program to our customers. So our mailers tried to have as much visuals as possible, and we translated the mailer to Amharic and Spanish, the top 2 spoken languages in our city. And about 7 months after deploying our purple cans, next slide, we made the decision as a city to remove glass from the single stream recycling curbside. And we know that removing glass from single stream is not an easy decision due to knowing how difficult behavior change is. It might be something that you're also struggling with as well. What happens if a glass processing center that can suddenly clean MRF glass economically come online next year? But for us, after months of education and outreach and seeing this popularity of the drop-off program grow, we actually evaluated the removal of glass as part of our new single stream recycling processing contract. And we had just gotten out of our last option year with our MRF, 7-year contract with our MRF post National Sword, and our tip fees, which I'll reveal later, have dramatically increased. And it was just not sustainable and environmentally or economic anymore. So in terms of resident feedback, it was definitely a ripping off the Band-Aid moment when we removed glass from our recycling, even though it was something that we have been talking about transparently for the past 2 years. And as expected, when a significant change is made as this, there were upset residents. But what we were surprised was how many residents did understand the issue and marketed and educated on our behalf, which if you read some of these comments, it'll give you as recycling managers some hope in the world just yet. So next. Since launch, we've collected over 710 tons of glass in the city of Alexandria alone. I think it's roughly 5,300 tons in Northern Virginia altogether. And I'd like to think that the trending up is my educational efforts, but 2020 has been a very difficult year for us. And I think we might have been compensating with extra wine and beer at home. So we'll see. Okay, so next, when we purchased some new glass containers, just sharing some things that we've tried out, one of my staff had this innovative idea of using plexiglass windows where the typical 30 by 30 sliding door is. And we've been getting really good feedback on this from residents on this design because it allows them to see how full the bin is. We've had residents actually reach out to us and said they cut themselves because they weren't sure how full the bin was, and so they kept pushing the glass and cut themselves. So this really allows how a visual cue of how full that bin is, which also helps the driver to easily spot the fullness to help us with the adjusting of the frequency of our pulls. And one lesson learned with this plexiglass pilot, I will say, is that we're trying different things, but I think polycarbonate rather than acrylic is probably better for the durability because our drivers like to tip our containers in order to get the full capacity of these bins, which is going to help you if you think about operationally and maximizing your hauling costs. Next. To show you just a little bit of our timeline, when we first did our MRF audit in August 2018, our glass composition was around 26% of our single stream. In March, when we conducted our MRF audit, and this is after we had removed glass from our single stream and a lot of education efforts went in, it's now roughly 9.5% of our stream. We're hoping to get that down even further. And with less recycling tonnage as well as higher single stream value of the ton, we're seeing significant savings on our processing contract. Next. Some challenges we faced and learned is that residents would put in a lot of concern tickets. The purple can went missing. So we developed a simple A-frame sign, which helped reduce those tickets in English and Spanish that the bin was getting emptied. Another question we often get from other places who are interested in starting this type of program is whether the restricted opening mean the residents will leave the glass on the ground. And this actually has happened for us only a handful of times in the course of a whole year, maybe 2 to 3 times, because it's not because of the restrictive openings, but when our bin was completely full and didn't get emptied before the weekend. And so once a pile starts, it grows. And this was a picture taken on Monday morning. Next. To share with you just some of the economics here, we estimate that there's approximately 2,000 tons of glass in our single stream from our first sort. And comparing our processing costs alone, not including hauling, our lowest bid for single stream processing came back to us in December of 2019 at $125 a ton, which does not even account for the negative $10 of the 3 mix index dragging the value of the rebate. And the cost to dispose our trash at Covanta Waste Energy Facility, which is in the boundary of the city, 3 miles away, is $43 a ton. And our processing fee for our glass of Fairfax County is $15 a ton. So just looking at disposal costs alone, you can see some of the cost savings. Next. As for other costs to purchase a 40-yard bin, including freight, roughly $17,000, they were able to paint the container for us. We budgeted in this coming fiscal year some money to repair plexiglass if we need to, any replacement signs, and also an annual mailer to our residents. So this is roughly our city's cost to operate 5 bins a year in terms of labor, hauling, and processing fees. I think it's close to $44, $45 a ton. That's hauling and processing, and just from that number alone, you can compare the waste to Covanta. It's pretty comparable, and it's actually savings for us if we don't even include the hauling. So next. We think there is a ton of opportunity in Virginia as we are the home to approximately 230 wineries and over 200 licensed microbreweries in Virginia. We like to drink in our state too. And we're really excited to see that this program is growing in Northern Virginia, and we have been adding more and more dots each month. We're at 32 bins and counting now. And I think that that's been one of the greatest reasons for success is just the coordination between our surrounding jurisdictions, having the same signage, the color, the messaging. We also deployed our bins at the same time so that one county didn't feel left behind than others. And it also was just consistent in messaging. And so I think there's just a ton of opportunity here, and we're really excited to see this grow. So I hope you found this information helpful. Here's our website, my contact, where you can find our regional map and mailers, and thank you for your time.
Great, thank you very much, Helen. That was super informative, and you guys are doing amazing work there. So it would be really cool to see that kind of a program replicated here as well. And so another great presentation coming up from Rose with Glass King. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Rose.
Thank you so much, Jordan. My name is Rose King, and I'm co-founder of Glass King Recovery and Recycling here in Phoenix, Arizona. I want to thank all of you for being here today. We've taken glass recycling and looked at it very differently. For us, glass recycling is very personal. And for us to actually have an impact, we know that we have to change the culture of recycling. We're very excited about the work that we do. We're partnered here with around 160 clients where we recover glass from, and we recover a tremendous amount of glass. And the way we do that is, could you go to the next slide, please? So the way we've done that is that we've taken a commercial approach to what we do. We offer a program in the hospitality industry that's called Don't Trash Glass. It's for bars, restaurants, resorts, casinos. any establishment that is producing glass. We do that in efforts to divert it from the landfill at the source. This gives the ability for our establishments, which we call sustainable partners, to effectively and conveniently remove glass at the time of consumption. This way, we believe that it creates an incredible platform to actually communicate the importance and why we do it. And in order to do that, we realized early on that we had to provide the resources in order to succeed. Our approach is very different. We want our collection bins to weigh less than the glass. As you can see in this picture, these containers hold about 1,000 pounds. Just to give you an idea, even now, well, pre-COVID, we'll say, pre-COVID, we would pick up these containers twice a week from a mall, and there's about 8 to 10 of them a week. That's how efficient it is to collect that kind of glass. And I'll brag too, Helen, our glass is very clean. It's 99% clean, and the resources that we provide, next slide, is important for us to communicate and communicate very specifically to the participants that are collecting the glass. And that's at the establishment level. And I don't know about any of you, but for me, besides babysitting, my first job was at a restaurant. I know a lot of high school kids, college kids, that's where they work. So for us, when we implement our program, we implement it together, all the stakeholders, from the general manager to the bar manager, to the dishwasher, to the person that owns the bar, to perhaps even the waste provider. For us, it takes a village to recycle, and that's what we want to do, is make it that personal, give information, see why we're doing it. Next slide. So for us, there's benefits in our program. It's simple. We're reducing trash. Here in Arizona, the costs are very similar to anywhere else. So we're diverting volume and weight, so the trash is reduced. The increased safety. Most establishments, they already separate their glass due to safety. The ones that don't, we've heard horror stories of how glass cuts through the bags, or they're so full that they just dropped out and they had this big mess. The other thing that we do is make sure that safety is everything. So we have to create a service program that's based on that volume, that specific area. It has to be tailored. There's not an establishment that's the same at all. And here, very much like Texas, Arizona is vast. What do you do with an area that collects very little? It's not efficient to send 6-7 tons of glass. Well, we create programs, and it's not overnight, I gotta tell you, but we create programs where we educate those towns and say, look, maybe we can stockpile. People don't even realize that you can stockpile glass outside. So again, it's all those different things that make this program so effective for us. One of the major parts of our program is that we give data. We want everybody to know what they're diverting. And more importantly, because they compare that to their trash bill. So it's, again, I believe everybody wants to do the right thing. But for us, as a glass recycler, as a glass recoverer, it has to make sense. Otherwise, you're not going to do that. And we understand that. The last part of our benefits is the marketing support. We want to make you shine. If you're a restaurant, if you're a bar, whatever, we want to show Arizona that you're doing the right thing. And we do that with public awareness, education, and we're really proud of that. Our goals obviously are to reduce the recycling contamination. We hear this all the time, the challenging parts of recycling glass. For us, we want to make it easy. We're the pros on how to collect the glass. Our partnership with Strategic Materials assists us tremendously. We don't have to separate it. We don't have to do any of that. We just have to take it to them. And that's how we're able to efficiently divert the millions of tons of glass that we put into our landfill every single year. I'm not sure about Texas, but here in Arizona, we throw away 1 million tons of glass each and every single year. We got to do better than that. So for us, it's focusing on the positive impacts that it has economically, social, environmentally. And for you cities, I have to tell you, you are in a battle with recycling. It feels like all the work that we've done to get to where we're at, COVID has somehow tried to eliminate all that effort. And I say no. We as an industry, we take great pride in creating partnerships that are going to work, is to help those cities look at, or those rural areas, look at glass recycling in a completely different way and recover it from the moment it's consumed till it becomes a bottle again. That's where our programs are at. Can you go to the next slide? So again, glass recycling for us is about making an impact, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We have created a multi-platform public awareness program, and we do it right with the people that are the participants. I can't even tell you how much pride we take in going to an establishment and talking to their staff, and they having the ability to ask us questions bilingually right then and there. For us, that's helped tremendously. And because of that, our long-term goals are to create an incredible amount of diversion, work with our nonprofits and create that loop system where we can assist with a rebate so they can educate as well, and do it together. I am a firm believer that if we all work together and we all do what we do best, then we can actually create a program that's going to be effective. Next slide. So again, we very much feel that it's incredibly important to educate and to create outreach programs. And that's what our Don't Trash Glass initiative is about. It's about creating those videos that we can all use, collateral, media campaigns, events, presentations together, where we're not making up new rules. I think that's what the hardest part about recycling is that all of a sudden there's different rules for recycling. One city will accept glass, one doesn't. All these different things. And I believe with glass that we could all universally follow the same rules, the same campaign about it. And that's what I hope for. And in order to do that, we'll create recycling programs that or educational curriculum, again, get this in front of those high school kids that are probably working at the restaurants, before they graduate high school. We want glass recycling to be a topic of conversation. And look, it's very important on how we recycle, but for us, it's more important why we recycle. So anyway, thank you so much for having me today. And I'm excited about the future when it comes to glass recycling.
Cool, thank you very much, Rose. So far we've heard some great examples of successful programs from Helen and from Rose. And now we're going to turn to Bill Clark with Strategic Materials. Seems like they're the happening crew there, as they've been able to to really help these two examples succeed. So go ahead and turn it over to Bill to hear about glass recycling in South Central Texas from a strategic standpoint.
Good morning. I'm very excited to be here today, and I hope my excitement comes through. Sometimes people say I talk a little slow, so please hang on. I will complete most of my sentences. I am Bill Clark. I spent 30 years working for a company called Schlumberger in manufacturing. The last 13 years I've been working in glass recycling, but really Strategic Materials is called a glass recycler, but we're a manufacturer, and we manufacture industrial feedstock for industries that are operating here in Texas and throughout the United States. That industrial feedstock is made from recycled glass. And in most cases, that recycled glass is indeed part of the circular economy, where it comes recycled again and again and again. As we were talking today, I'll mention the pulverizer and using glass for roadbed or other products. That's a good use if you don't have a better one nearby, but it's not circular. You crush a bottle, you put it on the road, it becomes roadbed forever. Okay, it's not quite the circular economy that we're looking for. I'm going to talk a little bit about strategic materials today. We're going to talk about some of the myths around recycling. We're going to talk about why glass is important and why glass is important here in Texas. Next slide, please. We're the largest glass recycler in North America. We have over 40 plants. Each of those plants is focused on our customer base and the supply base in the area. Our Wilson, North Carolina plant gets in over 34 18-wheelers at 22 tons each every day, and that glass is recycled. College Park, Georgia, very similar. Houston, Texas, we're making products in Houston. We put up a new plant in Houston. I saw one of the questions that came in said, why don't you build a plant in my neighborhood? Well, we built one in Houston, a brand new, very modern plant in Houston, and it opened in January of this year. Next slide, please. Some of the myths that we have, it's broken, it can't be accepted. I went to a MRF that was hand sorting glass and they only hand sorted whole bottles. We can accept broken glass. Most of our glass is broken as part of the process. Mixed color glass cannot be accepted. That may have been true 20, 30 years ago, but with the advent of the personal computer and the computerized optical sortation equipment, we sort colored glass all the time. Glass must be washed and cleaned. As part of the process, the material grinds against itself. The labels and organics, no problem, they're removed. Glass contaminates other recyclables. Well, anything in the single stream bin contaminates the other stuff. The aluminum contaminates the paper. The paper contaminates the glass. Indeed, single stream has some difficulties, and the processing at the MRF separates that and attempts to produce the cleanest streams possible. Here's the one that I hear so much. Well, we've got China's national sword policy, and now we can't recycle glass. Well, wait a minute. Never sent glass to China to be recycled. The glass is recycled domestically. It is recycled in North America. We talked earlier about wine bottles. not being able to be recycled. Well, every wine bottle probably is somewhere between 35 and 40% recycled glass. Here's another one. Glass has no value, belongs in the landfill. The value of glass has gone down. Well, glass has value. It can be maximized. The proper equipment is necessary. Glass value is indeed variable. The amount of contaminants in glass is what hurts glass value. Gee whiz, we talked about the MRF producing 70% good usable glass headed towards strategic materials. What would happen if they made a bale of paper and 30% of it was trash? Okay, the glass industry has always been the lower end, and in a lot of cases, MRFs treat glass as merely residue. Get it out of the system quickly because we're going to send it to strategic materials and they'll take it if it's 55, 60, 70%. But it does affect the value. No end markets for glass, gee whiz. There's end markets and manufacturers right here in Texas, container manufacturers. Do you guys realize that we are an essential business? Why is strategic materials an essential business during this COVID-19 crisis? Because we supply raw material to the glass industry, and the glass industry is making medical vials for serum to go into. They make food containers with the material that we provide. Yes, we are indeed essential. I like that term. Okay, looks like my slides are out of sequence here. Not out of sequence, but I'm slower than the slides are. How about that? As we talked earlier in my presentation, yes, I understand pulverization. I understand the equipment. I understand trying to make glass into roadbed material, but I'd rather use it where it has the highest value to society. And that is to go back into containers or fiberglass raw material, reflective bead raw material. Glass is 100% recyclable endlessly. There's no loss. Recycled glass, you don't have to go dig more sand out, more raw materials. Recycled glass melts at a lower temperature, saves a lot of energy. A lot of CO2 is replaced, okay, by using recycled glass. It extends the furnace life. Furnace life may not mean much to folks, but when a furnace goes down in a glass plant, it's typically down for a year to 16 months while they rebuild that furnace. What happens when that furnace goes down? All those people employed by that company, their job is in jeopardy. They may be laid off. They may not be able to help rebuild the furnace. We want to extend the furnace life as long as possible. Fiberglass building materials use recycled glass. Recycled glass adds strength properties to building products. Glass is inherently safe. When I look at water bottles, and if you saw me on the video, I just took a drink from a plastic water bottle. I cringe every time I do that. I know that plastic outgasses into whatever it holds. Personally, I don't ever use plastic in a microwave. If plastic goes above 140 degrees, I'm not real sure what happens, but I don't want it happening to me, okay? We always try to aim for the high value. The circular economy, when I talk about the circular economy, we want to make certain that we understand that glass comes back and is recycled again and again and again. And those efforts are what people want. I know everyone listening today has had to field the questions of, why can't I recycle my glass? Or what's going on with my glass recycling? Because consumers want to recycle their glass. They want glass products. They want to recycle the glass. Rachel, I want to connect with you. I am very disappointed that some of your programs have failed. And I'm known as a problem solver. I've been lucky enough to work with Helen Lee in Northern Virginia, and I applaud her program there. Helen Lee was a young girl the first time I went to Northern Virginia, which was over 13 years ago, to try to move that program forward. And it's only been the bright mind of Helen Lee and folks cooperating with other government entities in Northern Virginia that have made that program a success. Rose King, you're a positive problem solver, and I salute you. There was a couple other things I wanted to mention. We talked about failure, and failure is not a word that I like to use. To me, failure is pornographic. We're just pending the proper solution. There is no such thing as failure. We talked about pulverized glass. I think I have concluded. I do want to reach out to folks. We have the ability to help. We have the ability to solve problems. We're looking for quality. We want to improve the value of the glass at the source so it can pay for its transportation to strategic materials. We want to support your programs. We want to tailor your programs. We want to help you. And Texas is a big state, and I can't get to everybody overnight. So please utilize my contact information that you will receive. Get a hold of me. I want to help you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Bill. Appreciate it. Some super good information there. And yes, definitely. So I think we have some questions I think some of them have been answered through the type feature, but I do believe we have some open questions still. Is that right, Scott?
Yes, Jordan. There's a couple questions about the geography in Texas and with SMI's new plant in Houston. Is it closer to the San Antonio, Central Texas markets? Exactly what is, how much of economies of scale are needed in the Alamo area to consider additional processing in Central or South Texas? I think is a fair way to summarize several questions.
So I think we obviously probably turn that over to Bill real quick, just to see your thoughts on that market, the San Antonio market, and its proximity to Houston. Is it realistic that we have that radius covered, that we can actually efficiently and effectively send materials from there down to Houston?
And that's a tough question for a guy at my level to respond to. I do know that you don't have to get very far out of San Antonio, and suddenly you don't see much. Collections of glass, we're a volume-based business. We need volume. That's what has always made the Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia area very attractive, because there's so many folks there. Scott, do you happen to have any comment on that?
Well, yeah, but I can tell you that some of the things that we're looking at from an industry standpoint include trying to explore more rural aggregation sites, and it really is kind of a balancing act of trying to get drop-off glass, or glass that has quality value to it, into a, a more transportation-friendly means. So I think, based on some of the conversations that we've had and some of the feedback from earlier, even in this webinar, exploring possible regional aggregation hub, or even exploring what it might be to improve the freight rail system and delivery system down there may help in some respects. There was another question about the Austin San Antonio market, and I think that the recognition that Austin has a lot of glass, but that Balcones has invested, recently in a lot of glass cleaning equipment, and Balcones is producing, a good stream, I believe, for the Midlothian facility. I think it may just take a little bit of time for some of these transportation things and the new plant in Houston to take effect.
Let me explain some of the economics. When we talk about 70% usable glass, that means if we send a 20-ton truck from San Antonio to Midlothian, 6 tons of that 20 have to be landfilled. So we've lost basically a third of the truckload that we were sending. That 6 tons now has to go to a landfill, has to be separated out and go to a landfill. And there's a cost associated with that. So the transportation costs went up by a third, because a third of it's trash. And now that 6 tons has to be landfilled somewhere. It makes so much more sense to go to the source with a higher quality and ship a higher quality to the beneficiator, such that the costs for transportation and disposal are minimized.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. It all boils down to the economics of it, really. I mean, that's a very true thing, and that's part of what the recycling market development plan that we're working on right now is going to address to policymakers, is the ways and the means and the incentives or subsidies that need to exist at the state level to really help these programs continue or grow. And I think that goes back to one of the questions we had, about manufacturers' responsibility and, a consumer, why is this on consumers? Why is the fees on the counties and the local level? In that discussion, I touched on it briefly earlier. The discussion's happening. So we do have commitments from Owens, Illinois to use more recycled cullet in their glass bottle production. On the plastic side, you have commitments from all of the large consumer packaging groups to include more recycled content. The cardboard box industry is a very perfect example of circularity of their materials and need for their supply back into the supply chain. So, the manufacturers are involved and they're getting it. The programs exist in Europe. Leadership is seeing that it's necessary in America. And given, I think, the highlights of COVID have really pointed out that recycling is imperative to the supply stream. ISRI pointed out that the overall recycling industry in America supplies around 40% of feedstock for manufacturing or remanufacturing. So we play a major role, and I think national sword was a little bit of a setback, but in terms of where we're going and how we're going forward, there's a whole new story. And even on the most recent resource recycling webinar with waste management as well as waste connections, it's very obvious. People are at home, they're producing more recyclables, and in that they've seen a massive increase in glass. People are drinking more, they're staying more, they're not going out and barbecuing at friend's house. So the material is being generated at the curbside. And unfortunately, it was not a positive sentiment from that webinar, right? You get this new material, or a very valuable material in the view of circularity and reduction of carbon emissions and how you can actually utilize this indefinitely. It becomes this is a very important part of today's discussion: is how do we continue these programs in light of cities having financial cuts, and all sorts of different changes coming on with the whole new way of we do things in society. So I guess we'll circle back. Let me just check the questions real quick.
We're clear.
Jordan, if I
Yes.
could say really quick, you know, for us here in Arizona, we as a company, the transport costs have been one of the biggest crippling costs for us. So for us, that's what we've had to mitigate is how do we collect the material from wherever you're at, collect it efficiently and with the most impact. And again, I think that's where the partnerships work. I can't emphasize that enough. Us as collectors could never have the success without working hand in hand with strategic materials, without working hand in hand with somebody like the Glass Recycling Coalition. Scott and I have been working on things together, and all of this came out of COVID. So for us to emphasize the importance of glass recycling, and when Bill says that regardless, strategic materials will create a solution, they mean it. And it's with working with companies like us throughout the United States with a coalition, all these stakeholders coming together to assist you cities and that have been hit so hard. So I just wanted to say that.
I appreciate it. And that is something that we also have realized here in this state is the transportation costs. Shipping has become a priority to move the essential materials. And so with that has come increased prices. I mean, we were already combating the natural gas and oil industry here for competing drivers and shipping. And now you add in the whole supply chain and essential services necessary to move the materials. Yeah, the costs went up even more. And you know, again, the elephant in the room for a lot of this is that a municipality can look at it and go, I can put it in the ground for 25 to 35 bucks a ton, or we can try to process it for a tipping fee, an additional processing fee, and contamination fees, and all sorts of things. And it's the A and B choice, and they go with landfill. And it's an unfortunate thing that we're losing, you know, commodities. And this is not just limited to glass. I mean, this is plastics, paper, and metals, and everything. It's a choice being, you know, communities are facing right now. And so these are the discussions that we need to have is how do we localize these things? How do we take advantage of transportation? So, you know, a lot of companies don't like to send back empty trucks from when they go drop. So how do you connect with these people that are already going back to maybe give a discounted load to transport your material to that process? So these are the things that need to be dug into in Texas, in my opinion. And we're
Jordan, this is
Yes.
Rachel. I just wanted to comment on what Rose said. She's absolutely right with the partnerships. And I can say that not to call anyone out, but the issues that did fail, we couldn't get anywhere with strategic, and that was years ago. And so it's been a long time, and I would love to reconnect with everyone and see what we can do, because we have a great, I mean, we work with 60 different communities all over the state. We have a great platform to work with so many and really kind of do that hub and spoke to see what else we could possibly do in some areas that don't have access right now. And one of the ones that we did have an issue with, that was one that was getting good, clean truckloads of material. For our program, you know, we separate all of our material, so nothing is mixed. And for us, quality has been a huge, huge part of what we do. And we do have so many communities that have been recycling with us for 25 years, and we send our material directly to the mill. So they understand that mindset. We don't try to go to the MRF with anything. We always are trying to go that route and have full truckloads. And one of those communities specifically was getting a lot of material and glass in from one of the beer distributors that was in the area. But yet when we talked to them about helping us pay for some of that transportation and cover some of the costs to recycle glass, there was nothing else was happening because of that. And so we do need to look for more of those partnerships, and we would love to work with that, because I know so many people are really interested in it and want to do more, and we just need to figure out more ways. So not too long ago, I even saw, I believe it was in Pennsylvania, that had like a traveling trailer that was going to several different locations. So, you know, I do feel like there's been a lot of advancement since we started looking at some of these programs. programs. And we don't like pulverizing either. That's not our first option. We'd love to recycle, but we've had to kind of fill some of those gaps, and we're ready to look into a new phase of what we can do. So.
Rachel, I wanted to tell you, thank you so much. When we started the Don't Trash Glass Initiative back in 2018, we started with a sponsorship with Crescent Crown, who is a local beverage distributor. And his feeling was that he was selling millions of cases of bottles. Where was his place? Where was his responsibility in the whole loop of recycling? And that's what it's going to take, where we feel personally responsible for what happens to that glass product until it dies. Because like Bill said, and we've said again, it's endlessly recycled. So we have to do it in a way that, again, collectively we come together so that voice is heard in one way.
I like that a lot. And I think that's a great point that we need to make too. I also mentioned in my presentation, I don't think there's enough education to residents when material is in bottles that is made from recycled material. Slap it on there, let them know, not only is it recyclable, but this was made from that much. That's the kind of thing that, from my perspective, does translate to people so well, because they feel like what they're doing has an impact and they can see that. And we have an alcohol company here in Austin, and their bottle is made from this beautiful recycled glass, and it's very obvious that that's what's happening, and it has recycled symbols all over it. And so that's the kind of thing that that's what I was really speaking to. I wish we saw more of that, because I do think that would translate into people feeling like they're making that big difference in what they're doing with glass recycling. And I did also, Rose, love your information as far as education. I do think we need more that's universal, that no matter if I'm in Phoenix or I'm in Houston, wherever I am, I'm seeing some of the same, and Recycling Partnership does a great job of that, seeing that same graphic and that same information. I know it changes from community to community on what they can do, but some things that are universal, that would be fantastic too.
And just in echoing that, for us here in Arizona, we believe that glass recycling should be so universal, but how do I help Texas? Well, I guarantee you that there's some amazing recycler in your rural areas that just needs a little help. That's all it is. And that's where Bill and I come in, where we can, help. And I think that these webinars and all of this is about, once people realize that there's a program or a bunch of us on giving them how, because we're the pros on that, but more importantly, why we do it, I think we'll make an impact together.
That
Jordan,
echoes Simon Sinek, right? Go ahead.
I can address a couple of the items that came up, and then there was a question that ended up in the chat that didn't end up in the Q&A that we can do. I think Rachel's right. Some additional recognition on the bottles that the material is recycled. I mean, I think maybe the industry needs to relook at the fact that even though we know that the average bottle across the country is already 1/3 recycled material, every glass bottle that comes out of the plant, and most of even the Flint jars, food jars and things like that, are already 1/3 recycled material in the United States, that it's better to remind people of that as they see it in their hands. And so we're looking at that. I can tell everybody on the webinar that the industry is working on a new initiative to study regional markets, and Texas is squarely in our sights for analytical study, and that we have been working in both Northern Virginia and, as Rose has said, in the Phoenix area at some of these alternative collection models to see if we can gather up additional tonnages so that we can create it. the markets across the country, as many of the speakers have spoken to, is there is a chicken egg nature to the thing, and you need that public-private partnership. We need, you know, the enough of the glass at a quality level that's high enough at a mass, you know, that is adequate to get the processing going. At the same time, it may just be that we need to, you know, do some investment in certain areas in better transportation options. An example is, and I will bring up an example from my time growing up in Texas. I remember, I'm old enough to remember that after I finished my paper route, in the morning I would drive through the subdivisions that were getting built in and around NASA, because that's where I grew up in Houston, and I would be picking up the cans and the bottles, and I would be taking them to the convenience store and getting paid back. There was a bottle bill or some version of a bottle deposit in Texas in the past, and that the quality level nationally of the material that comes from the 10 states that are left that have bottle deposit programs, there's only 10 of them. That material makes up almost 60% of the cullet, the recycled glass that ends up back in bottles and jars from manufacturing facilities across the country. So quality really is an issue. It helps the processing, and, you know, and gets back to a circular economy there. So I would tell the folks in Texas that we are looking at Texas. We're looking at ways to help, and this conversation is definitely a part of getting us to that future going forward. Oh, in the chat box there was a question for Rachel about clarifying. Did you mention $150 a ton, and what was that a reference to?
Sure.
Okay.
For our material, typically, you know, we're getting revenue out of our material. Either we're getting paid for it, for like cardboard, or, you know, we're cost neutral. We've always had in our contract a $50 a ton charge for glass that wasn't separated. And if it was separated, it was, you know, a cost neutral situation. And they just recently told us that they were increasing it to $150 a ton to dispose of the glass. And that's, you know, no one has spoke to me if it was a quality issue. I go to that facility a lot. I'd never seen anything like that. But at the same time, for us, that was kind of telling that we know it's hard right now. And with so many different commodity prices low and things changing from month to month, you know, we just weren't sure exactly the reasoning behind that. But that's worrisome. And we hope that's not the trend to try and get more folks recycling. So.
Okay, thanks.
Rachel, who
Yes.
is they said $150 a ton?
They're on this call.
I mean, was it strategic materials?
No, it was waste management. It was going to a
Okay.
MRF. No, it wasn't strategic.
Okay, and indeed, Waste Management has their overhead and running it through the MRF, but if you're taking clean material to a MRF, you're inserting someone in the loop that doesn't need to be there. Ship it direct to strategic materials. And I cannot wait to have a conversation with you, by the way.
Very excited, yes, because I feel like it's been coming for a long time for us to reconnect and try again. So
Yes, thank you.
I just want to say something really quick. Here in Arizona, we have an incredible relationship with Waste Management. I mean, we work hand in hand. There are these restaurants, these resorts, windshield providers, where we provide the service at the source. Waste Management, trust me when I tell you this, they love programs taking the glass out of their equipment. They're waste providers. So I too would love to talk to you after this, because when there's a will, there's a way. And if you can mitigate those costs, if it can make sense for you, then that's what it's about, right?
Yeah, and this particular location, I just have to mention, Waste Management has been a fantastic partner for them. I don't want any criticism in anything that I'm saying today. I wanted to have an honest conversation so we could figure out next steps. But as far as that particular situation, it was something that in this particular community was sending other commodities. It was a mixed commodity truck. So there was separated paper, separated plastic, separated glass, and they didn't quite have the volume, and that's part of the reason why I was going to the MRF. However, again, I think there's always room to change up programs and do something differently, because this one in particular is on a perfect route to not only pick up glass in that particular location, but in several others that are right there and within 30 minutes of it. So again, there's different things that we could do a little bit differently if this wasn't, we had more options.
And indeed, in kind of a salute to Helen Lee in Northern Virginia, what they did over the 12 or 13 years since I first went up there was involvement of others and coordination of efforts at other communities. And indeed, before we change anything, we sit down and we talk to the waste management, we talk to the local folks, we get everyone involved, because a lot of times the price is high because they don't want it. The price is high because there's an issue with it. There's certain things that we all need to understand, and coordinating all those efforts together is what Northern Virginia did and came up with a great program.
Yeah.
Jordan, there was also a couple questions about the Texas Department of Transportation study and program. We were able to post the links in the chat for that. I'm not sure we can get specific answers to, percentages and quality use right now, but there are links in the chat to that study.
Definitely, and I'm going to connect the two that are involved in that and together after this call. And I do appreciate the point out, Professor Davio. So thank you for providing that link. There was a question from the audience about, do we stay with the transportation situation we currently have, or do we find ways to bring in end users to the local area so that transportation is minimized? And again, I kind of just, in my opinion, that this is exactly what the Texas Recycling Market Development Plan is addressing. So this is why we have a survey out to all commodity sectors, processors, and end-use manufacturers about what are they doing, how much can they do, what do they need. All these different questions are being accumulated so that we can put up a very prescriptive and milestone set plan for the state to support and grow the Texas recycling industry. So that right there will be addressed in this market development plan, as we have identified, and the Recycling Partnership also identified, recycling deserts within Texas. The north kind of west area there, Lubbock, Amarillo, there's close to 890,000 people that have either no access or very limited drop-off access for recycling. So we realize it, we know it, and this is why we took the action last legislative session, is to have this state be proactive in creating the domestic infrastructure that has long been necessary to move materials in our state and then beyond. So like Scott mentioned, Louisiana, there are end-use processors or manufacturers outside of Texas that would gladly consume the material. That's going back to the transportation thing. So, we're looking forward to this market development plan, but in the interim, before this plan comes out, these are the solutions that we can work on together, right? We have partnerships, we have strategic and work with Rachel. So this is the impetus of this meeting, was to make these connections, to hear from Helen, to hear from Rose about examples of partnerships that have succeeded, and then to implement them. I will pause real quick just we're going to wrap up discussion and go to a live poll in just a second. But before we go there, I want to just go and just say, does anyone else have any other questions or any other discussion points before we move forward? We are a little bit ahead of schedule, so I do appreciate that. But I want to make sure that we are able to address anything that the audience or panelists would like to address. I think we're all good. Okay, let's move to that live poll. All right, so, and this is, this is continuing the conversation. We did the Texas Glass Recycling Workshop in November 2019. We took a lot of good information about barriers and possible solutions from the attendees there. but now we are continuing this conversation for the South Central Texas area. So we want to know, and you can use more than one answer. So if you got one idea, great. Throw in another idea as well. This is the time to be, to put out your ideas, outside the box thinking for what steps are needed to collaborate to improve glass recycling in South Central Texas, but also beyond. So let's see what ideas the panelists and attendees have. And again, you can answer more or provide more than one question or answer, sorry. Try to type and text at the same time, doesn't work. Quality of products, good. So remember the steps to collaborate in improving glass recycling. Public-private partnerships, we did just hear about that, it's awesome. Good, improving transportation. You can use one word also, you can use sentences. Collaboration, right? That seems to be a good one. And then they're kind of lining up. So if we can scroll down a little bit, we'll see some of the other ones. Overcoming distance to markets, that's good. I guess it's clustering, but require glass to be collected separately from others. That's very true. Yeah, and that's something that was definitely highlighted this time, right? That we have seen success in programs that have removed it from other single stream recycling. Just like Bill said, I mean, if you think about each commodity versus another commodity, they all contaminate each other. So it's I don't think it does any good justice to point out that glass, contaminates everything, because in the real scheme of thing, separation does provide cleaner materials, but we do have the technology that is enabling single stream recycling to continue. So it's good. Partnerships, source separation, yep, educational outreach. So a lot of echoing I see of what we heard today, right? Connecting the governmental entities across the geographic area. So there's something that we want to, part of that recycling market development plan also is creating a map of the different entities and industries that are located in Texas, so we can see where we can improve. We know where glass is, we know where some of the other manufacturers are, but we don't have a single source to kind of go to and point. That would be great. Open discussion between haulers, producers, and markets. That's awesome, and I think that's happening right now. If you look at Loop with TerraCycle and their whole reusable, refillable revolution that they're bringing, I really do believe, and they have glass products. Your orange juice will be coming in a glass jar that will be cleaned and refurbished and put out multiple times until it breaks, and then it can be recycled indefinitely back into another orange juice container. So I think these discussions between people that are using stuff are happening. A big bold one right at the top, right? More summits like this. Yeah, exactly. So we held the one in November. We're holding this one here in the South Central Texas area. Maybe next time we head out west, let's talk about El Paso. I think one of the comments in the Q&A box was, why do we lack infrastructure between San Antonio and New Mexico? And you're right, that is a long pointed out issue, is that we are really deficient in the infrastructure necessary to circulate materials once you get kind of west of 35 and start heading out towards El Paso. So let's see what else we've got. Quality of products. Manufacturers should bear some of the recycling costs. And that's, again, EPR. And so just for a little bit of a thing for Texas, we tried to bottle bill for the last about, I think, 3 sessions. So that's something that has not been attempted in Texas, but it's something that policymakers from our experience have not really been too apt to absorbing, because Texas and taxes don't really go well together. And so it's viewed as, a bottle deposit fee or even a line item. If you don't even want to create like a tax, it's viewed as a consumer tax. And that is something the state does not want to really get involved with, is another additional tax on something or somebody to even if it is a helpful means to provide an efficient and effective program. So there's got to be other discussions, but we do have big consumer groups that are also entering this conversation. So that may be what it took, and that's what it took for the recycling market development plan, was getting these manufacturers down to testify and go, recycling is important to our business. Here's why. I think we are going to go ahead and move to the next. In fact, I think that's about it on this poll. Steps to collaborate, partnerships. Yeah. And so we're going to continue this, and offline again, we'll give you the contact information for our speakers, and we're going to work on setting up hopefully some projects with GRC and Strategic and AACOG and Rachel's group, and just try to get the circulation of glass, whether it be on the regional aspect or we finally figure out something that we can get glass from San Antonio up to Midlothian effectively. All right. This is kind of our capping of this session. Again, we're finishing about 30 minutes early, which is, it's a good thing. People do like some time back in their day, but we will give a few more minutes here just for everyone to have a last minute discussion or questions before we go about the rest of our day. But if you guys could please just go ahead and, either using your computer or your text message on your phone, go ahead and have enter one word describing this glass summit.
And Jordan, this is Helen from Alexandria. If one last thought I would share is, for us in our region, we felt like we've been waiting and waiting and waiting for the MRFs or the end markets or someone else other than us to do something. And I think the big lesson learned for us is, don't wait for the MRFs, don't wait for a magical glass processor to come online. There is a way to do this, I think, economically.
Yeah.
Jordan,
yes, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I just wanted to say one thing. During this COVID time, one of the biggest challenges that we had, even in bottle bill states, is that it wasn't moving. It wasn't being recycled. And so although tax is great, for us in Arizona, where it's a non-bottle bill state, it has to mean far more than that. And so that's what these relationships for us is about, these type of webinars, about creating that same message of how important it is. We get all the time, well, we can't afford to recycle glass. We say, you can't afford not to. And so that's where we're at. So again, I believe that at times like this, when, like rules, like taxes and stuff, where we're left with, not a whole lot of choice, that's where programs like ours, and hopefully, other programs that aren't bottle bills, are going to help at a time like this.
Yes. No,
and Jordan, I can also add that we're studying kind of what we would call, new modern versions of bottle bills. The traditional, when you say bottle bill, people think of it, in the way that they have with the tax and things of that nature. And traditionally, a lot of the opposition has come more from the retail community. They don't want to be the place that takes things back, or the beer wholesalers, quite honestly, or the beverage distributors and wholesalers that don't want to be involved in that program. There are models out there, and there are people studying some new models like the Oregon model that actually almost does create a co-op where the distributors and wholesalers are part of it, and that they share in the benefits. Another one of the benefits of the Oregon model is that they use regional deposit return location centers that are separate from the retailer. So the grocery store may not, they have an obligation to be part of the system to take it back, but they can defer their obligation to actually take the material back to a deposit location that is in the same square mile or the same strip center, but may not be directly into the store. And that lastly, in Oregon, they return all of the receipts, all of the benefits at the end, either go to the parts of the co-op or go reinvested back into the system to create additional infrastructure and additional locations to capture the material. And it's not just glass, it's glass, aluminum, and PET bottles mostly. But those are the kind of systems and the evolution of systems that we think may have a choice, a better chance of getting support. But as the industry is concerned, we're looking forward to working with Texas officials on what we can do to improve transportation costs and maybe some regional aggregation options, especially in areas that are more remote.
Yeah, definitely. And that's part of our legislative outreach this upcoming session, since Texas has every 2 years on legislation, is we're going to use this time before the in-market development plan is released to educate about specific commodities or markets to each and every policymaker out there. And so, these are the things we're going to have a walk the hall session in probably March or April, depending on the state of the pandemic and different things in consideration. But we invite all of you that would be willing to participate in anything in our state here to come and join us at the Capitol to just inform and educate policymakers about the economic advantages. And I think Rose really pointed that out, and that's how we passed our legislation so successfully last time. Is I come from California. You can sell the it's good for the environment, it's good for the carbon, all of that. That speech works well in many states. When you come to Texas, the environmental message is, unfortunately, it kind of hits like oil and water. So where you have to tune it in is Texas is a very business pro state. They're very proactive in that manner of trying to gather markets and manufacturers and just build that infrastructure. And so when we went and pointed to the economics of recycling, the data that came out of the previous study we did in 2015, it really put into the mindset of, oh, okay, this is a good thing. This is $3.3 billion to the Texas economy. It is 17,000 jobs. So it's a viable industry, and that's something that we're going to go back with and go, we have a plan coming. Here's all the industries that are very committed to making this realistic and work in this state, and here's why. So I'll kind of preempt everything before this plan is released so that the state will then take action on the plan. So that's what we're really hoping to do. Let's see here. So I want to just give each of the remaining speakers a quick little testimonial or anything to kind of wrap up your presentation or your thoughts about this workshop or your thoughts about going forward. So I just want to, I guess we'll start with Bruce from Waste Management. Do you have any thoughts, closers, other ideas, any other input regarding anything that you've heard from today?
Well, I thought there were some interesting ideas discussed, and I think they were beneficial, and it's always good to get more ideas, the better, to look for ways to improve any type of recycling, but especially glass recycling. So I really appreciated what all was said on the call today.
Definitely, and we definitely appreciate the continued support from Waste Management. I mean, the industry itself, you guys have taken some really proactive states and effective movements during COVID, and have really helped out communities that we have definitely seen. So, you guys are a great provider and a great partner in this state, and we do appreciate your participation today and just in general in helping us advance recycling. Let's go ahead and go over to Bill. Any thoughts, closing input or anything about this?
I've been doing this for almost 15 years in the southern states, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. First of the year I moved to Texas, I got really excited about Texas, and we had COVID-19 and can't go visit folks, and it's been very frustrating. And I'm so thrilled that today we had a meeting, we got to talk to each other. Finally, here it is, July, but I feel like I've made contact with folks. I noticed that there was 54 attendees out there at the beginning of the meeting, and there was 54 attendees at the end of the meeting. So it definitely is something that has everyone's interest, and I'm excited to get started.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks again. And again, your partnership and support for even the last meeting that we did in November. Laura flew down, and just again, Strategic is a great partner and a supporter of STAR, and we definitely really do appreciate that as well. Rose, you have any closing thoughts or input for the group? Or Helen?
Oh, I'm right here. I'm sorry.
Okay,
I'm
sorry,
talking. That's okay. I forgot to unmute myself. Thank you guys so much I love being a part of this. Not because I was a speaker, but truly it was very, very good and informative. And I felt all of our synergy together. I want to thank Waste Management. Waste Management for us has been a huge partner here in Arizona. And I can assure you that they will continue to be a great partner in any other state. Of course, Strategic Materials, oh my goodness. Strategic Materials has been our buddy, our partner for years now. And there's one thing about Strategic Materials that Bill said, they will help get that glass to them. And that's why they've created partnerships like us. So I'm so excited. And also the relationships that we've created with Scott and the Glass Packaging Institute and the Recycling Coalition, all of this at such a bad time in our lives right now, for us to take this opportunity to improve what we do is really, really a blessing. So thank you very much.
No, yeah, and definitely thank you, Rose, for taking the time today and sharing your successes and the partnerships and willingness to continue to work with the entities in Texas. So it's, you know, again, this is why we do these sort of workshops, either in person or virtually, is to make these connections inside Texas as well as outside Texas, because we're all in this together to create that circular economy, to move these materials, to create opportunities for jobs and for materials and just everything in general. I think we're all in it for the same reason. And so the more that we're able to connect with each other and realize there are successes, there are failures, and how to learn from those, that's the most important thing. So I, again, appreciate your time today on helping us accomplish that. Helen, any closing thoughts or input?
I think when you build it, they will come. And that was certainly the case for us. We put out some purple bins and they came. I just want to wish good luck to everybody on the call. Hope everyone stays healthy and safe. And, you know, please feel free to reach out to me if you have questions on our bin specs or, you know, the color paint. Maybe you guys want to go purple over there too. Make it a national color for glass. So yeah, I'm happy to, you know, butt ideas and things like that. So feel free to reach out. Good luck.
Great. Thank you, Helen. Yeah, again, appreciate your time today and highlighting the successes of your program. And that, I mean, just the topic alone of starting something and then pulling out of a single stream system from glass, that's you know, just a phenomenal accomplishment in itself. So it seems like you did it successfully, and that's something that I think we can take and learn from here in Texas. Let's go with Rachel. Any closing thoughts or input for the group?
I just want to thank everyone. All of your stories are so helpful, and seeing something different than what we experience. When Jordan asked me to be on this webinar, I wasn't quite sure I was a good fit, because we have struggled a lot with glass recycling, but I consider myself a very realistic recycler, and I wanted to show the realities of what we are struggling with, so people that know more than I do and have the resources to help can really start working with us to figure out how to overcome some of these things. I just want to reiterate, no criticism today on anything. I really, truly, Waste Management has always been a great partner. All of our vendors have always been so great to us, and really, you know, they have an outlook of something more than just metropolitan areas. And we've always really, really appreciated that, because sometimes we do feel overlooked. I say we in rural Texas. And so I just want to make sure that that point is clear. And I'm excited about where this can go and working with some of y'all to advance glass recycling.
Awesome. Yeah, and again, I appreciate your honesty and the openness about the successes and the failures. I think that's very important for us to hear from and to learn from, is we need to hear about what didn't work, right? So we don't repeat that and make the same mistake again. And in no sense did I ever think that anybody came across as you know, negative towards another entity. You know, basically it's a statement of that there are real costs to processing this for any entity, whether that's Waste Management or Strategic Materials, or are you guys as collectors and hauling it to the people. So the costs are real. We know that, and that's something that we need to address. And again, I don't think it was shaming or slamming in any way. That's the fact of doing business, and this is why we're having this meeting, is to overcome those challenges and those obstacles. Go ahead and let's go with Chris. Any input or thoughts for the group?
Absolutely. I know, once again, the reason that AACOG is at this table is because our governments across our region, they are struggling, and especially with COVID, budgets are being exhausted, and they have to make hard decisions. And when it comes down to recycling, if they have to pick the cheaper option of taking the landfill over recycling, they'll choose that option, not necessarily because they're evil, but because, you know, at the end of the day, they have to balance their budget and they have to spend their money as effectively as they can. And I know today we talked a lot about source aggregation, about source separation, and public and private partnerships. And that is exactly what AACOG would love to see happen. And we are here to work with all of you and with all of our governments to make sure that we can move forward on not only glass, but on other materials as well. And so very excited to move forward. And I appreciate everyone's time today. I always learn something new on these webinars, and to also echo the thoughts, it was great to get to speak a little more with everybody. It's been a real shame that we couldn't do this in person. These are the kind of events we love to do in person because we can always build such better relationships when we can get together afterwards and talk a little more. And so, yeah, just thank you everyone for your time. And like I said, this is something that is very important to AACOG, and we want to see more glass recycling in our region, and we're here to do whatever we can to help.
Great. Thank you very much, Christopher. And I, again, appreciate your reaching out to STAR and the coordination and the months of work, getting all these speakers together, and just this whole idea coming to fruition. So it wouldn't have been possible without the partnership with you guys. So I definitely appreciate the participation and time that AACOG has given to this important webinar. I'm going to turn it over to Scott real quick, just for any last thoughts, comments for the group, and then I'll close up with just my thoughts and comments.
Sure, Jordan, thank you. I'll just echo the thanks to all of our speakers and all of our attendees for joining and being part of the conversations. There were some great questions in there. We tried to fling those questions around as best we could to everybody. And on behalf of the Glass Recycling Coalition and our members, we're just honored to be a part of this for a second time. And we will look forward to doing it again. And thank you to STAR and to AACOG and for everybody for joining today.
Great. Yeah, I again appreciate the partnership and support, and the help all along the way, whether it be our workshops or our Texas Recycling Market Development Survey. You guys have always been there and been informative and supportive, and so that's something again that makes all of this happen, are these connections and the facilitations that we get by working together to advance whatever material that we're all working on. So in this situation is glass, and it's a very important commodity, and STAR is focused on advancing the glass recycling industry in Texas. And combating those low landfill tipping fees. So thanks again for your partnership and help with that. My closing thoughts is just, again, I can't thank each and every panelist and attendee enough for spending the time today to talk about this important subject, to go over the successes, to go over the failures, to feed questions, to get the ideas generating of how do we move beyond the current norm of doing things? How do we combat this low landfill tipping fee that everyone's just like, well, we can just dump it in the ground? I think we have ideas. We're going to walk away with this with action items. So this is not just everyone got together for a webinar and back to business. And unfortunately, it's too much to recycle glass, and transportation doesn't exist. We have the recycling market development plan going. We have these partnerships going. We have these offline conversations about to start up and exist. So, please just monitor our website, recyclingstar.org. Check out Keep Texas Recycling, the Glass Recycling Coalition, AACOG, everyone that's involved and has presented today. I think obviously we'll be continuing the work that we do, but specific to this webinar on how we are going to really advance glass recycling in South Central Texas. Just a quick plug, STAR does have our virtual conference coming up in October, the 5th through the 7th. It definitely is going to be online. It was supposed to be in Austin, but we did make that decision to go ahead and hold it virtually. We do have great sessions and speakers lined up, including Tom Zaki from the CEO of TerraCycle. He's going to be talking about loop and the reuse revolution that's coming up, basically, and what he's seen from COVID. So we're excited about that. And lastly, for any of you out there that are manufacturers or processors and or are thinking about using recycled material in your manufacturing processes, please check out our website. It's in the comment box there. It's texasrecyclingstudy.org, txrecyclingstudy.org. And you can also find that on the STAR website. But we'd love your participation in the survey. This is an opportunity to feed the data and the input that we are going to provide to the policymakers to help support and grow the Texas recycling industry. I know I'm redundant on that line, but really this is the chance that everyone that is involved in the supply chain can give their input, and it'll go directly to the people that are making these important decisions that affect our industry and the circulation of materials. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything. Again, the comments coming in is fantastic. It looks, everything's doing great. No further questions. We're ending about 15 minutes early, so I think everyone can go ahead and get some lunch and then continue your day. Again, appreciate your time, your participation. We will send out the contact list for everybody. And I guess if there's no other further thoughts or comments, I think we're going to adjourn.